Welcome to the UFO Woman Show. I'm your host, Melisa Kennedy, where every episode is uncensored, unfiltered, and unscripted, so you never know what you're going to hear on this show, what we might say, and what we might do. So it's kind of fun. Anyway, with that said, today's episode, we're going to be talking about ancient UFOs. Is there evidence that UFOs were on Earth many, many years ago? And we're going to talk about the different theories with my two co-stars here today. But what I want you to think about is about the millions of people that believe extraterrestrials actually visited us here on Earth millions of years ago, ancient times, and the evidence that supports that, or if it does at all. And we've learned everything from flying saucers to flying carpets in these ancient scriptures, sculptures, paintings. We've got lots of evidence to look at as possible theories to support the notion that UFOs did visit us in ancient times. So with that being said, I want to bring up a few paintings that I found that we can discuss today, and whether or not they are depictions of ancient times with UFOs, and if those actual paintings were something that was of a creative mindset, or were they actually depicting something that they saw with their own eyes. So I've got Kevin Briggs with us here again today, and I have Edgar, Yohe, two awesome guys that I am honored and privileged to have by my side every single week. With that being said, I want to pull up our very first painting, guys, and this is one that is a Chinese rendering. If you look at this picture, a few things pop out in my mind, and the one obvious picture that pops out is the kind of diamond, almost looks like a kite, if you will, but a diamond holographic looking rendering up in the top right-hand corner. It's kind of purple and pink. That's an interesting impression there. And then there's a second part in this painting that I didn't see at first, but after studying this last night, I have to bring this up. In the middle of the picture, kind of towards the left, you see what looks to me like to be a satellite. Now, this is an ancient Chinese painting that is many, many, many years old, way before any satellites were ever created in our time, and before anything such as holograms and things like that were in existence. So let's talk about this first painting. Kevin, when you look at that, what's something that you think of?
Yeah, that depicts me as a craft, a triangular craft that looks like a pyramid. I've heard of these before. In fact, I was speaking with someone just recently in Florida, and he was doing a CE5, and he had an inverted pyramid that appeared before the group there. And so, yeah, these craft are a particular type of craft, and as you say, Melisa, there's plenty of evidence in our history, our own history, to support this.
Right. Well, and this painting here, one of the things that I learned when I was in college and got my degree in education, elementary education, I had to take art history. Well, in art history, they teach you that the artists of those times usually did not take creative liberty in their drawings, because they were commissioned to draw something to remember that moment, that event, something that was, of importance, and they wanted to preserve that and perhaps promote whatever the agenda was at the time. So it's not like today's world where we have, artists that are, doing these really artsy type things that are real out there as far as reality. So Edgar, what did you think of the satellite and the holographic kind of diamond-shaped looking craft in this painting?
Well, they got a radio telescope sitting there off to your left, and that's the inverted dish, and that's much like what we use today for radio astronomy. And the the diamond-shaped craft, there has been sightings, and that's also part of our listing of shapes of crafts to look for.
Right, right. Well, that's a great painting there. Now, I have another rendering that I want to share. It's also Chinese, and this one's more of a sketch, okay? So I want to look at that. We can pull that up. All right, here's a sketch that is also ancient Chinese, and it, to me, looks almost like a blueprint, if you will, or some sort of a I don't know, step-by-step model of how to build a UFO. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, yes, I haven't seen this particular photograph or picture before, but yes, it does look like a possible diagram in relation to possibly a flying saucer. I know that the Indians, some of their old cultures, they have diagrams of Vimana.
Yes.
That were flying around. I'm sure you'll touch on that subject.
We
yes,
will.
I would agree entirely. That may well be. One would have to get someone to decipher the language on there. And
Right,
see
right. Well, it
exactly
looks
what
like
says.
hieroglyphs are kind of on the side there.
okay.
It looks like some windows.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Very suspicious looking, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
What do you think, Edgar, of this rendering?
Oh, it's like it could be a blueprint, or it could be an actual depiction of a craft that they saw, and then they started laying out what they were perceiving it to be.
Okay. All right. So that's two examples of Chinese ancient art that could be interpreted as UFO evidence in ancient times. So that, I think, is worth taking note of. Whether or not your school of thought is one that believes in UFOs, or if you're still skeptic of it, we're going to present to you some very compelling evidence today, and we're going to discuss all of these theories and possible logical explanations as to what they could have been. We know that these ancient times, they had lots of myths, folklore, legends, and even possible truths to support the fact that there were extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. And that's the topic of today's conversation. We're going to show a couple more pictures and a couple more examples of some ancient paintings, renderings that support the topic of today. And then later we're going to talk to you, Kevin, about a download that you actually had about UFOs. And then, of course, Edgar, as always, you're going to be sharing with us the scientific evidence and support for all of this. So the last painting that I actually want to talk about right now is one of Indian origin, which is kind of what you mentioned, Kevin. And this Indian rendering looks to me like a palace or a very, very large flying craft. Whether or not you want to call it a UFO, we'll say a flying craft. And it looks like it has very many layers, lots of, well, height and width to it. I know I haven't personally been to India, but I certainly have studied it in school and have some friends that are from India, and they have told me that, yes, there's even buildings that replica this. What are your thoughts when you look at this, Kevin, given your situation, your connection to the ETs?
Okay, well, yes, as you say, it's very intriguing. And if you look in many of the ancient texts of India, they refer to these things as vimanas.
Right.
Yes.
And they come in all different sizes. A two-man vimana that can just travel people about. And then there's the larger ones like the floating cities and things like that. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of information there in these old texts. And we don't personally, I'm sure there are people that do study them, and all the information is there. It's just been lost in our history, I think. And
right.
But yes, certainly there's the evidence there. And within those texts, they refer to the ETs as well. So a bit like our indigenous people, which we might cover a bit later on, they include the star families in their texts, in their ancient stories and ancient texts.
Well, and we just haven't really been the thought of all of this being of extraterrestrial origin hasn't been taught to us. It's been taught out of us to support, government and religious organizations' agendas. And so we haven't really been able to explore some of this in a different way, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing here today, is opening up ideas and theories as to what these things are actually representing. Edgar, what do you think about this Indian drawing?
Well, the drawing is a depiction of the Vimana, and there's many, many, as Kevin was saying, modalities that they had. So, that being stated, David Childress Hatcher wrote several books on the Vimana of India and the war that they had.
Oh yes, the war in the skies.
In the skies.
Yes, and I did not unfortunately include that photograph today because I kind of didn't want to have all photographs today, but that is true. That's a good point. There are very many legends and stories, truths, if you want to throw that in there, that support that there was a war, a battle in the skies for Earth. And that is some of what has been depicted in these paintings. So definitely I think the Indian drawing that we have up there is one of much interest. Their culture, I think, really supports the fact that we are not alone in this universe, that they embrace the fact that we have, and I'm going to use quotes, gods, because that's what a lot of them are referred to, or beings from the heavens or beings from the cosmos to support these renderings these stories that have been passed down for generations. So regardless of what your school of thought is, definitely I think this is something that needs to be brought to the forefront in ufology and in our understanding and our knowledge of what the universe truly is about. And that's more of what we're going to talk about today. Now, I have one more painting that is one of, I would say, more of a religious tone, and this one's called the Shepherd's Vision. Now, in the Shepherd's Vision, we have the Madonna, and then over her shoulder, you see this kind of a dark blob, if you will, or this little picture here, and I've blown it up to show a close-up of this picture. Now, if you are coming from the religious school of thought and what they believe was drawn in this and many other paintings, they are going to take the position that this is a spiritual or a heavenly body. Now, when I think of it from that standpoint and calling it angelic, I would think that there would be some sort of a human body and wings drawn, if that was indeed what that painter was trying to depict. So if it were one of angelic origin, then I would say, where's the body and where's the angel wings? If that's truly what that artist was trying to depict. Yep. Now, if it were just a mistake, that maybe the painter just went, oh no, okay, there went a little blob on my my paintbrush, then would he have drawn the antenna and the rays coming off of it if it were a mistake? So the third option that I want to throw out there to our audience to think about is if this were a UFO, a spacecraft, then certainly in that painting kind of looks like a UFO. And if that's the case, and you look at art history and what they usually would paint would be what they saw, and in that corner you see the shepherd, hence the name of the painting, the Shepherd's Vision. He's going like this, and he's looking up at this object in the sky. And if it was of angelic origin, again, I ask you, where are the wings and where's the human body? Why is there an antenna, and why are there rays coming off of it? Kevin, what's your ideas?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think there were many photographs in the old biblical paintings.
Oh, a lot of
where they
them.
depict a flying saucer in the sky.
Right.
Depending on what your terminology is. But they're in there, and they're in there for a reason, because there's a connection, I'm sure, between our religions, our ETs, our star families. I'm sure they've been guiding us, and I know they've been guiding and teaching me all my life, but I suspect they've been guiding and teaching humanity all our life. And we're just coming to realize that now.
Right.
And I think that's the importance of the history that we have here. And we're bringing that history forward now. But we do have the beauty now of the internet. All this information is out there. If you're interested, if you're a new viewer and you're just interested in UFOs and this is your first interest, there's so much you can find on the internet.
There is. And you can research these paintings that I have up on the screen now. You can find these anywhere. All you have to do is just type it in, Google it, and you can find it. And I think this particular Shepherd's Vision is one. I mean, there's so many. I would be 2 or 3 shows, I think, if I showed every one of them that's out there. But I thought this particular one was quite interesting because it really challenges that notion of, well, it's an angelic being, and I have to ask, well, if it's an angelic being, where's the body, where's the wings? Thoughts on that, Edgar?
Well, the other thing, too, is that the artist also put a depiction of that on her shoulder.
Shadow. If you look at it closely, there's a shadow.
There's a shadow on her shoulder of that same craft.
Yes. Yes, you can actually see it glowing down on her shoulder. So if it were an object, it would have a shadow that is being shown on her shoulder. It's very interesting. Definitely something for us to ponder over and, kind of challenge what we've been told as far as what the truth is. And maybe it's time for us to start to open up that book and challenge our knowledge of what these things really are depicting. Now, with that said, we're talking about a religious painting here and the fact that it was a angelic being that was being depicted by that artist. Well, it dawned on me, actually right before we went live on the show here, that it kind of ties in, guys, with what we've been talking about the last several weeks, and that is spirituality. What have we talked about on the last 3 episodes of the UFO Woman? We've talked about the craft, the UFO, if you will, is conscious. Well, perhaps in these renderings, we're showing a spiritual vehicle. What do you think about that, Kevin?
I never thought about that, but
like I said, it just came to me.
Quite a jump, quite a leap, quite an analogy, really. But I am aware of the conscious craft because I've actually travelled onto conscious craft when I travel outside of my body. When I separate my conscious energy, I'm able to travel wherever I want to go. And I've met Orton D many times on a craft on the astral plane, and they've invited me into the craft, and as I've gone through the skin is conscious. I'm able to feel that. So
it's spiritual.
It is very spiritual, and that's where the ETs are coming into our reality as a spiritual door, might we say. And then they're showing themselves, but they've done this throughout history, I believe.
Right.
And we're just really
for millions of years
re-examining our own history.
Exactly. And again, it goes back to what we've been saying here on the show. UFOs have a consciousness, and they are spiritual crafts. And if you want to think of it from that school of thought, that rendering of the Shepherd's Vision, which is a religious rendering, you could argue that that is a spiritual craft, because I know a lot of times they depict things like the afterlife, what happens to us when we ascend, and we've talked about that here on the show. And if that's the case, then that UFO or spiritual vehicle is accurate in that rendering. Edgar, what do you think?
Well, we've lost so much of our history because of religious wars and stuff. The Library of Alexandria had a lot of this information, even the information about Atlantis. It was mentioned by Socrates and those that had studied at the Library of Alexandria. Then you had the conquistadors come over to the Americas and destroy all the work that the Incas and the Aztec, along with the Mayans, had.
Exactly. And so we're destroying a lot of the history because of agendas that they want to control the narrative. Well, so much of the narrative has been controlled in the religious and the historical accuracies in these statues and paintings and drawings that they didn't want to destabilize the society by coming forth with the truth. And so therefore the perpetual lie continues. But I kind of think we're ready to know the truth. I think there's enough of us, there's millions of us that believe extraterrestrials have visited us in ancient times and are still visiting us today. And I think the narrative needs to change. I think the time is now to change this, and hopefully the three of us are going to be pioneers in helping that come forth. So you mentioned Edgar Atlantis. So glad you mentioned that, because I have a quote. I'll put it up here on the screen. There's a quote from Edgar Cayce. And we've talked about Edgar Cayce here on the show, and he has a quote, and we'll bring it up here. It says, "The Atlanteans had air traffic controllers, thus control towers." And that's Edgar Cayce, who we've discussed on our show several times. And he actually said about air traffic controllers back in the days of Atlantis. Wow. Well, if there were air traffic control towers back in the Atlantis times, then there had to be flying machines of some sort. Right, Edgar?
That's correct.
Yes, absolutely. What do you think, Kevin?
Oh, without a doubt, and obviously he was one of the great psychics of our time, and he was a great healer as well, I understand.
Yes,
He used
yes.
to heal people in his sleep.
He was a healer. He was a spiritualist. I really kind of like to think of him as like the father of universal consciousness, because he's kind of the one that was really in the forefront. And I know that he was ridiculed as crazy and conspiracy theorists. And, you know, I was on my soapbox last week about all that. I won't be on my soapbox too much today, but you know, I just feel really strongly about us getting away from these labels, and just because it's not something we've been taught our whole lives doesn't mean that it's crazy, because let's face it, there's been a lot of things debunked in our lifetime that we thought as kids or in our schooling that was another way, and we've proven all of that wrong. Anyway, so yeah, Edgar Cayce definitely is someone that we're probably going to talk about a lot on our show, because a lot of what his research supports what we're doing here on the show. So with that said, that's actually all of my renderings and paintings that I wanted to bring up today, but I thought it was a good way to start the show and kind of get our audience on the same page as us today, talking about UFOs, past, present, and future. Certainly, we are creating our own UFOs. Our military is actually reversing that technology. And Edgar, I know you can support me on this, being Air Force and for 20 years, you can support me on that front. So, you know, some of what we're seeing is probably some of our own.
Some of it is, and this has been going on since 1947, and even before that.
Before 1947.
Before
For those of you that don't know, 1947 is the year that Roswell happened. A lot of things happened at that time that was significant as far as UFO research and whatnot. But actually, it happened before that.
The Germans had it in the 1930s.
1930s.
That they started all this.
So 90 years. Basically.
So well over 90 years.
Right. And it's been a cover-up. It's been tried to be debunked, but people like us are going to bring it back out in the forefront. So speaking of forefront, speaking of debunking, let's talk about Kevin here for a second, because you had a download of UFO technology and how it works. You've talked about it on previous episodes, that there was a formula piece that was missing, which was the C, which is the consciousness. We talked about that. But my goodness, you have brought with you today some really exciting things that were downloaded to you, and you actually have drawings and everything to support it. So I'm going to just let you take this over here, Kevin, for a while, because this is fascinating stuff.
Okay, well, we have covered downloads in the past, and we've spoke about the quantum unified field theory, the theory of everything, and downloads that they've given me.
Right.
On this particular occasion, I was at a conference, and I met an engineer from Canada. And he said, Kevin, do you have any information about their propulsion systems? And I said to him, no, I don't, not at all. But I said, I can ask them if they'll share some information with me. So we exchanged emails, and then I said, email me later, and then I'll get together and I'll ask them and see if they'll give me any information. So he emailed me with some questions about anti-gravity craft.
Oh, okay.
And as I read the questions, I was given a download immediately. Again, as we've discussed, information within a split second. And very often with the downloads, I have to write them down because I will forget them. I don't always, but sometimes I do. And then with this, there are actually diagrams. Well, they haven't given me diagrams in the past, so that was new. And I'm no artist, as I'm no scientist.
So you're not like Picasso.
No, so
Okay.
they're really scribblings, but they do depict the craft or the engine that we're telling me, and it's an anti-gravity engine. Is this particular one that they showed me? And I'll just explain what they told me.
And then maybe you can hold it up so the audience can see it.
Show it to the camera.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
It's a sphere. It was made of strontium and unpentium. It was an alloy, 50% of each. It was a 1/4 inch thick. It was filled with mercury. Within the sphere, it was lined with copper, and then there was a copper spindle in the middle which spun within the mercury. And it said that they put 1,000 volts through it, through this copper core, and it spun at 10,000 revs per minute.
Oh, wow.
So they gave me all this exact detail, and then they said that it obviously reacts with our magnetosphere and cancels out the gravity and allows them to use gravity itself as not only anti-gravity but as a propulsion. Just fascinating, really. They gave me some gravitational fields that these craft show, and they also said that the reason why when we see craft sometimes, when we see the big round lights that are glowing, that's because this particular anti-gravity engine excites the ions in the atmosphere immediately around the craft. So that glow that you're seeing are the excited electrons, ions that are in the atmosphere, and that's why we see the glow. So
if you can hold that
I'll
up
hold this one up so you can have a look at it.
Show them. That's kind of neat.
They are just sketches, so you have to excuse my. I'm no artist. The bottom one depicts the gravitational flow around the craft, and then. That's just a clearer one that I did to make it. I did that afterwards to show that it was filled with mercury.
So if you want to bring it down just a little bit so we can get that in camera view, that would be great. Yeah, that's awesome.
How's that? Okay. And then they also gave me the...
and here, this has the core.
The core with the gravitational field on it, which was...
so you're saying it's going around...
Around the craft, in a spiral. That's what they showed me. And then they went on to explain that that's one single engine.
That's one engine.
And if you put 5 engines together in a sphere, then you've got obviously a larger craft with more power. And they described, they gave me the gravitational rotation within that craft or within those particular engines. And that was... if you can see that on the... Oops, wrong way.
Actually, go the other way.
There we are.
There you go. Okay, so hold that there for a second, Kevin. So what I'm seeing is you have this rotation. Edgar, help me out because your expertise in this. I'm seeing a rotation going... How would you explain that scientifically? Because I know you being in the Air Force, you've got a lot of knowledge of this.
Well, what they did, they've got that... the energy fields are going in a clockwise position off the central engine. So by having 5 engines, you have a total balance of, and you can direct the thrust or whatever it is that you need to do just by changing the angle of the tubes. So that's how they're able to keep the stability of their craft.
Oh, wow. Doesn't look like anything that we're used to seeing, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
And I love that you get this download, Kevin. I mean, and then you're drawing this. This is a great visual. I feel like we're back in elementary school when I was a teacher. We had our little visual aids, you know. It's great. I love it.
They did also show me that for a larger craft, those engines could be placed in different configurations. You could have them in line or in a circle, which is one that they showed me.
Yeah.
And these would be, each of these circles would be an engine in
Each
a larger,
circle's an engine.
in the larger craft on these anti-gravity ones.
Okay.
So you would have all those.
So bring it down just a little bit, Kevin.
All those
there we
engines there around the craft.
So every little circle there inside is a separate engine?
Yes. And bearing in mind, this is just for the anti-gravity propulsion systems that they have.
Okay.
They have many other types of engines, but this is what this guy was asking for.
Now I wonder, you know, when people have UFO sightings and they're seeing a craft up above, are they looking at it from the angle that you just showed with the engines underneath?
I don't know that. They didn't give me that visual. They just
Sorry
gave
to
me
put you on the spot, but I mean, I just wonder, you know, you see that a lot.
You do see that, but they didn't give me that visual.
Okay.
They just gave me the sketches. Honestly, I'm not an artist. I'm nowhere near an artist.
Actually, you know, you keep saying you're not an artist, but actually, I think these are pretty good. I mean,
okay.
They're understandable.
Right.
It's basic. It's basic enough to, and hopefully, it's coming through on the camera well because
I have one.
I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty accurate.
Well, this was the original one that I actually did at the time. That was the.
And what is this picture
Okay,
of?
that's the magnetic
Bring it down just
field.
a tad.
Yes.
Okay,
so
that's the magnetic field, right?
Yes. So then I tidied it up and drew this afterwards.
Oh.
Oh, in fact, I better not say that because my wife drew it for me.
Well, Sandy drew it.
Yes, I'll be getting into trouble. Yeah, my wife drew that for me.
Now we know who the true artist is.
Well, Sandy is an artist. So
she
that's
is
right,
an
well, yeah.
artist. Okay.
So I gave her this, and she
Sandy,
did that
you
for
get
me.
all the credit for this, sweetie, not Kevin. Oh my gosh, I know, Edgar, you're probably itching to get in here. You've got some commentary on this. I know you do, being the Air Force guy that you are. What are you thinking when you're looking at all these renderings that Kevin downloaded and his sweet wife actually drew? What do you think?
They're very accurate, and this is the stuff that Bob Lazar was trying to get out to the population.
Oh yes.
And they told Bob Lazar that you're crazy, you're nuts, you never existed at Los Alamos or Area 51, Groom Lake S4. So all these things are now being brought out, and they told me in 2015 when I had my encounter, please get the word out because your governments are holding us hostage, prisoner, and slave. And this is exactly what they were talking about. Let's get this technology out here. Let's learn how to use it, and let's make this a better planet. There was another scientist. His name was Searle. He was over in England, and he actually hand-built 2 UFOs, as we would classify them as, and he sent them out unmanned, and they did exactly what these craft did. They actually.
What year was that? Not to interrupt you,
That's
but
back in the 1950s. It was around 1954, 55.
Okay.
There's a couple of pictures that I had found years ago of some of the stuff that he was working on. And it wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s that the British government went in with trumped-up charges accusing Searle of stealing electricity from him when he was generating his own electricity.
Wow. So free energy.
So it was free energy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so what happened on that, he wound up going through a major divorce. He was jailed, and while he was in jail, people went in, most likely from MI6 or something, from the government of the British government, and burned his house down, and he lost roughly 80-90% of his research.
Oh my gosh. Well, do you know anything about that, Kevin? I mean,
I don't know anything about
You're
that
from
particular
England, so-
scientist that Edgar's talking about.
Okay.
But I do have a question for Edgar. Perhaps he can answer this. When I got the information in relation to the unpentium and the strontium, I'd heard of strontium. I didn't know what it was. But
that's a big word.
But I haven't heard of this, and I have to be careful when I say it, because
Yeah.
it's unpentium. I hadn't heard of that, so I used the internet and found some information about it. And what it says that this unpentium is an actual metal, and it's UUP, and it's got an atomic number of 115, and it's characterized as a metal. It was discovered in 2003 jointly by a group of Americans and Russians working together, which is good to see.
Yes.
But the downside to this particular unpentium, it only lasts for 1/10 of a second, and then it decays.
Oh, gosh.
And then the strontium, I found that, and but that's a well-known, and again it's a metal. But the problem with strontium itself is when it reacts with water and air, it disintegrates. So really, these two metals don't seem the correct metals to be used in a flying craft.
I'm sitting here thinking, is that really what these crafts are made out of?
Well, that's what I'm
don't
thinking.
know.
So I thought, I don't know whether Edgar had any more information about the two metals.
Wasn't one of those, Edgar, in the Roswell UFO?
Yeah, that
Okay.
was what Bob Lazar was working with.
Okay. Well, take it away, Edgar, because I know this is your thing.
So the impentium is element 115, and they had roughly 115 pounds of this stuff that they had taken out of one of their captured craft, and we can produce it on this planet, but like you said, it only has like a very short lifespan. So where did the intergalactics get their source of this element from in order to make these engines?
You're saying like maybe from another planet?
So, and this goes back to what I believe is created by black holes when they explode.
We talked about that a couple weeks ago.
And I believe a lot of these heavy elements have come from black holes that have reached their life cycle, and just like a regular sun where it goes supernova, so can a black hole in an explosion.
Well, okay, so maybe they're mining this metal from a planet or a black hole, like you're saying.
It's a possibility.
Which kind of brings me to another theory or another point to make here, and that is the fact that if you want to say that these ancient paintings and drawings and statues and hieroglyphs and the countless other evidence found all around the world in all cultures and all religions and all governments, wherever you want to talk about it, it's there. That kind of makes you think about the theory that extraterrestrials came here to mine Earth's resources. Gold, a host of other things, but gold's the first thing that comes to mind. The Anunnaki, there's a lot of theories out there that the Anunnaki came to Earth to mine the gold and thus impacted humanity. And if you think about, go back to school for just a second, guys, and when we learned about evolution, well, there's a big old gap from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. Yes, I have to go here for just a second, make a point. Big gap. Really doesn't make any sense in the evolution theory whatsoever. But if you inject this theory of extraterrestrials coming and actually pushing forward humanity, it kind of makes sense. It's that missing link. And is it so bad that extraterrestrials actually have a hand in the progress of humankind? Is that such a bad thing? I don't think so. It's only bad if you want to force a narrative, which is not one of extraterrestrial. But I think it's kind of cool to think that, we are way beyond planet Earth, and we have an intergalactic family out there of ancestors. I think it's really awesome. So if you kind of think of it that way, that, yay, the extraterrestrials have helped mankind become what they are today, and hence the reason why we have lots of sources of, well, evidence to support that.
It's interesting that you mentioned the mining and the minerals,
Yeah.
because I have an experience of that, which is quite interesting. You're aware of my ability to separate my consciousness from my physical, and I do that all the time for enjoyment, for entertainment. And I was out one evening relaxing outside of my body, and I was travelling around the solar system, and I was just visiting the different planets, and then I'm coming back, and as I'm coming back between the moon and the Earth, I don't think actually materialised, but I came into a cockpit of a craft that was being piloted by two greys.
Oh.
And it was a commercial craft transporting minerals from the Earth to the moon.
Of course.
And these two greys looked at me, and they turned round and said to one another, what's he doing here? And then, but from that as well, I got their other thoughts that they were piloting this craft from Earth to the moon, and it contained minerals that they were using for building and things. So anyway, I realised I shouldn't be there.
You're kind of like a hitchhiker.
Yeah, hitchhiking side to the galaxy, Ellie. Anyway,
Kevin's out here doing this.
I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I do apologise," and I left. I went back home, I went back into my body, and I woke up, and there was a grey stood next to my bed.
Oh, wow.
A tall grey, a large head, very official. He reminded me of a military man.
Oh, okay.
And he actually warned me not to interfere.
Oh, he warned you
warned me
not
not
to
to interfere, yes.
Oh,
and that
my
was it,
gosh.
And I left. So I do have the ability to communicate to people on crafts and things, as you know.
Right.
We discussed the rainbow one the other week. Well, it's just like that, really. Well,
right.
And just fascinating, though, that...
and again, this is not rehearsed, guys. Literally, you didn't know I was going to say that about minerals.
No, but it's just every time we talk about these things,
Right.
I've always got a little story that attaches to it. And it builds a whole picture of what's really going on. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I had no idea that you were on a craft at one point and had that experience with minerals, and oh my gosh. And so the Greys told you just to stay out of it?
Yeah, don't interfere, yeah.
Well, I'm just picturing, here I am, an extraterrestrial, going down through the galaxy in my little craft, and all of a sudden this human just appears in the back of my ship. That's kind of interesting.
But again, going back to consciousness, we were using consciousness, I was using consciousness for travel.
Right.
And communicating with them.
Hence the spiritual vehicle.
Exactly.
Which I made the point earlier,
so
right.
that ties it all in again.
It really does.
Because the ETs have the higher vibrational frequency, and they also are more spiritually aware than we are. Mm-hmm. We're learning to do that now. We're expanding our knowledge, and we all have these abilities. We're just being kept in the dark. Really.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think as it becomes more common knowledge, and we all start to get away from the labels and the stigma, get rid of all this crazy conspiracy theorist labels. It becomes more accepted in our culture. Some cultures already accept this. I mean, it's a way of life to have meditation and tapping into that universal consciousness, hence our topic of our book of Tap into Universal Consciousness. But it's really, well, in some ways it's new to us, for those of us that are watching here in the United States, but we have people watching all over the world. In fact, Kevin, your brother's watching, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's watching from Spain.
He's from Spain. He's watching. Hi, brother. But, we have people all over the world watching our show, and that's really cool because that brings their culture into this acceptance of we're not alone in the universe, and they're really not, I guess, as taboo about this subject as we are here in America, which is good for them, bad for us, but good for them.
It was interesting when now you brought up my brother. I spoke to him this week. I speak to him all the time. But he's a retired aircraft engineer. He had his own business. He now lives in Spain overlooking the Mediterranean.
Oh,
and so
lucky guy.
Yeah, lucky guy. Yeah, he's worked hard for it all his life, so he's enjoying the benefits of it now. But he just recently, he told me this week, he developed tinnitus in the ear, in one ear. and then it developed in the other ear. So he'd got tinnitus in both ears. He'd had it for a couple of months, and he Googled it to see what he could do about it, and it just said, go visit the doctor, really. That was,
Right.
that was the advice.
That's the answer
But
for everything, it
then
seems like.
he watched our episode where I spoke about Shiva.
Oh,
And about Shiva being a
yes.
healer, and you have to ask, and she will help you heal. So he went to bed that night, and he thought, I'll ask Shiva. Because bearing in mind he had the incident with the butterfly, which we discussed
Oh, yes, the
again.
butterfly that we talked
But
about.
that's another story. Anyway, I'll
Right.
continue with this one. He went to bed, he asked Shiva if she would heal his tinnitus for him. He woke up the following day. It wasn't as bad, but he still had it in both ears. So he thought, I'll try it again the next night. So he tried it again the next night. He asked Shiva, could she heal him of his tinnitus? He woke up the following morning, and it wasn't until later on in the morning, I don't know, 11:30, he realised his tinnitus had gone.
Gone.
And he'd had it for 2 months.
Ah, wow.
Now-
Power of thought, folks. I
But
love
because
this.
he
and
watched
that,
the show,
Yes, that
and
energy.
he's becoming more spiritual now and making contact.
Right.
And
I love that.
but it's amazing, really. And he himself now, he's doing more research because he realizes there's more to us than what we taught or
Right.
what we know.
Yes.
So and because he's an intelligent guy, he's practical. He's like
Sure.
Edgar, you know.
Mr. Practical over here.
but he's moving into this area now, and
Right.
he's learning, and he's asking. If
I
we're
love that.
asking the ETs, asking the higher conscious beings,
Good for you, Brother Briggs.
they're
That's
here.
awesome.
They're here to assist us.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. What do you think, Edgar? You're over there. I know you're probably going to contribute something to that about universal consciousness and how we tap into it and what we can actually do with it. And in regards to even to the extraterrestrials.
Well, since we are all pure energy, and all this is an illusion, which brings up the holographic worlds, they have taken and helped us to develop our minds so that we can connect with the greater, higher powers.
Right.
Zachariah Sitchin wrote about this in the 12th Planet. And Zachariah Sitchin spent 33 years of his life before he put the first word to print in the book, The 12th Planet, which was his first book of the Earth Chronicles.
Great book, by the way, if you haven't read it.
The show Stargate, the movie Stargate, plagiarized Zachariah Sitchin's works. And Zachariah Sitchin was still in litigation when he passed away
Yeah.
over the plagiarization of his work. And that was a lot of life work that he put in. And
Right.
he concluded that modern man started around 750,000 years ago, or 750,000 years.
Right.
And they've been progressively bringing us to where we're at today.
Yeah, I agree. Great book, by the way. It's a long book. It's a real big one, but it's worth the read. Quite good. Kevin, you want to add anything to that?
Not really. I think we've covered that totally.
Okay.
Edgar's answered my questions and things, and
Right.
yeah, I think we're good with that.
So, you guys brought up that element in the periodic table, and I'm going to let you say the word again. And I'm not even going to attempt that word.
Unpentium.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so it is on the periodic table.
Yes, atomic number
Okay.
115.
115?
Yeah, well, 115.
115.
Yeah.
115.
Element 115. Interesting, right? Well, it certainly is something to think about. Certainly chemistry is not my cup of tea. I did take it in college, but I probably should have paid attention just a little bit more. Had I known what I was going to get into in the future, I would have paid attention. So all you kids out there watching, make sure you pay attention to all your science classes, because you never know what you're going to get into, because it could come in handy later on. Speaking of which, not knowing what you're going to get into, I actually had a very interesting conversation with a friend the other day who is extremely skeptical, and she wanted to ask me, how do you believe in all this stuff, Melisa? Why do you think there's UFOs and aliens? And of course, I had to immediately correct her about the word alien, because I kind of don't like that word. I like more extraterrestrial, or even better, intergalactics. I like that word too. she's like, well, how are you involved in all this? Why do you believe in all this? We weren't taught this in school. This is like crazy stuff you're doing. Well, I listened to her viewpoint, and it's a little bit like what we've been talking about the last few weeks, and that is, what is your perceived reality? Your perceived reality is what you want it to be. If you want it to be in a little tunnel, which is what we've been taught, then your perceived reality is going to be skeptic and challenging to a lot of the topics that we're talking about today. It's not going to be open to, the ideas of something new, something different. And when humans get scared of something new, what do? We attack it, right? We attack those things that we don't understand and that we don't know about. So that's just human nature. That's just what we do. And it's hard for us to overcome that emotion sometimes. But when we do overcome that emotion, that's when we actually start to learn. And as a former school teacher, I'm here to tell you that that was one of my greatest, opportunities as a teacher to help open the minds of our children so that they don't just have a tunnel vision through their whole life, but actually they're open to learning new things. And that's how we grow, and that's how we learn as a species. So with that said, my approach with her was, well, I'll listen to your perceived reality if and only if you listen to my perceived reality. And it was actually a beautiful moment, because we came from two completely different schools of thought, totally different. But yet we were able to talk about it civilly and in a way that was respectful, and in a way that at the end, we still respected each other's differences of opinion and viewpoints. But yet we listened to each other, and I gave her some things to think about when I was being challenged as to, well, what's the proof? Where's the proof? Well, I think today in our episode we have put out there some evidence that, you can certainly say could be proof if you want to think of it that way. Certainly do your own research and come to your own conclusions, but I think the three of us are definitely on the same page, and I don't think that there's this many forms of artwork, ancient ruins, hieroglyphs from all these different cultures, all these different time periods that are all saying the same thing if there wasn't some truth into it. Would you agree with that, Kevin?
I would agree, and it's good that you were able to have come from two different points of view, because our society at the moment is being divided all the time,
Right.
And what people are doing and becoming aggressive instead of discussing, coming to some understanding, even if it's just to agree to disagree.
Exactly, and that is kind of what we did. We agreed to disagree out of respect for our friendship, because we love each other that much that even though our opinions on this particular subject matter are so completely different.
And they are just that, opinions.
Exactly, and it really, yeah, you're right. And it's just like what I said last week. If we come from a place of our heart, then we change the reality of everything.
That's
and right. I've had people say, oh, well, Melisa just wants to say we all agree, then everything's great. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, what I'm saying is, if you sit and listen with an open mind to everything, and I've never closed the book on anything. In fact, I listen to all viewpoints, and I listen to all different types of ideas, because that's how I learn, and that's how I can become someone better for you, the audience, and this world is when you gather more information, the more educated you become. So when you start to look at things that way, and when you start to talk to people that are skeptic or just have no knowledge of what you're talking about, when you come from that place, then that's when you come to a place that you can actually make a difference.
And that's so true with everything, because we are all part of the matrix. We have that connection. Even trees, when somebody starts to cut a tree down, it's already sending through the root system to the other trees, hey,
Right.
I'm in peril. And when you start destroying a whole bunch of trees, it upsets the entire balance of the energies.
And we're all living
We're all
beings. We're all
energy.
connected.
Now,
We're all
now
energy.
Edgar's mentioned trees, I've got a quick story because we're running out of time now, but I was asked to join in a prayer circle this week with the Lakota indigenous peoples.
Oh, wonderful.
And part of
Okay.
it's a big ceremony for them this week, a very sacred ceremony. And part of that ceremony is to move a tree and replant it. And as
No,
we
that's a nice idea.
It is, isn't
Replant it instead of just
I don't
killing
know the
it.
full implications of it, but when they replanted the tree, all the dragonflies and butterflies came out of the forest, as it were, and flew around the tree. That was showing the connection of consciousness.
And I love butterflies
And our
and
indigenous
dragonflies.
people, they know all about consciousness.
Right.
They know about their star families, that they've come from their star families. We're the ones, our culture, that doesn't know. But we've mentioned in our new book the dragonflies
Yes.
and the
butterflies. Yes.
the connection to consciousness. And while we did this prayer meeting, it was fascinating to get the information direct from the scene as it was happening.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Of course, I love dragonflies and butterflies, and I know some of you out there watching, you feel the same way. You love butterflies, and I think that's super cool, and really is a good illustration, Kevin, of how we are all interconnected in this universe, and what we do to the living things impacts us all. So with that said, I want you all to think about my new quote, which is change what you know, change where you go. I am your host, Melisa Kennedy. Thank you for watching the UFO Woman Show. And until next week, keep looking up.